Welcome to the studio at 50 Oliver. My name is Jason Daniels, and I'm broadcasting today from the small podcast studio at 50 Oliver Street. If you like what you see, if you find this interview interesting, all the resources that we're using to create it are available to all the residents in Easton. So hopefully you'll find this interesting and want to get in touch and not just see somebody like myself here, but imagine yourself in this seat too. With me today in the studio is Abdul Shibley. Abdul is an author, and he lives in Easton with his wife Nazreen Shibli, and he has a PhD and MA in economics from Boston University. Has published 6 books and numerous scientific articles on economics, environmental policy, and the information technology in refereed professional journals. Abdullah will be hosting a workshop, Writing in the Digital Age, at the Amesbury Library, Queesit House, on Tuesday, March 12th from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. over on Main Street in Easton. Abdullah, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right. So I think maybe we should just start off pretty easily here and tell me, what do you mean when you say writing in the digital age?
As you know, these days a writer has many tools, resources, and other technology available for writing, for editing, as well as to verify facts. Plus, after you have written, you can check grammar, you can check the style, as well as whether you're plagiarizing. So these are all resources that are helping the writer, as well as giving the writer the boost that you need.
Mm-hmm. Are these tools that you have found through your own experiences as a writer?
Very good question, Jason. Some of them are available to everybody. For example, when I first started writing, many years ago, word processing was in its early stages. So grammar check was not as readily available. Now, Microsoft Word has its own grammar spell check. So these are available to anybody. But there are some that are not readily available or not well known. So I discover them. But some of the important things I do is I use the resources to help me, to augment my style, my process. So some of it is there, some of it you use to your own advantage and customize it.
Okay. So who would you say this seminar or workshop is targeted for? What kind of folks, what level of writing ability or experience would people need to come to a workshop like this?
You don't need any background. You can be a freshman.
Uh-huh.
In other words, you could be someone who writes with pencil and paper or just starting to write. So I'm hoping that you will come, but also if you're an intermediate level writer and have not published yet, then I can point you in the direction where you will become a published writer. I was there 10 years ago, and now I have 6 books in my name.
Well, tell me a little bit about that then. Where did your motivation come for developing a workshop for writers?
I always consider myself a writer who is learning. it just so happened that I found a pathway to publishing articles, short stories, and then compiling them in books. So I took this journey, but all by myself, and am still learning. So what motivated me is to inspire people, spread the message that if you like writing and you are hesitating,
Yeah.
then come and talk to me. I will not charge you. I'll just give you some pointers. And most importantly, I will tell you how I got from A to B.
Mm-hmm.
A meaning I was a professor as well as IT professional and wrote emails mostly, and then decided I have to share my story with others and started sharing by email and eventually sent one to a newspaper. And that's how I got started. So there are different ways to let others know what you're thinking and to get feedback, which is the most important thing.
Right. So it sounds to me like your writing came out organically in your life. You didn't set out necessarily to be a writer, but about 10 years ago, something happened, and that set you on a path to be a writer. Could you tell me a bit more about that?
Jason, you are very perceptive. 10 years, you hit it right on the nail. I also reflected on this. What happened 10 years ago? And one of the things that did happen was that my children left the coop. I had plenty of free time. The other thing is that my mother passed away. My father passed away a long time ago, but after my mother passed away, I started reflecting who will share their story with their grandchildren, who will work towards that.
Mm-hmm.
So I started taking notes, and that my first story was really about my experience many years ago in Bangladesh when I took over the role of my family driver. My father was having a difficult time managing the salary of his driver, and I took over. So my first story was about that experience, and I called it Driving Mr. Dad.
Okay.
Like that movie. And that resonated with a lot of people. And after that, I just started writing about my childhood and my family and the times that I was growing up in.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So, what do you think resonated with people through this at the beginning?
At the beginning, I was writing about the experience I had in my country, my childhood, things that my readers who live here as well as abroad could connect with. And that was the good old times. Then my editor said, "Hey, would you like to write a short story?" And I said, "Well, that's a totally different ball game." But I started, and he accepted it. So fiction also draws a lot of people. And then I wrote a column for a newspaper called Letter from Boston, and that was a newspaper, English language newspaper in Bangladesh. So my readers were interested in what's happening there, how do you live your life in Easton, and they are all over the globe. And finally, then I started writing about these social issues. I write a lot of op-eds now for newspapers, social issues, economic issues, and environment for the newspaper that I am the columnist for.
Okay. And so what was the story behind the the newspaper? Sort of, was that something you sought out, working and writing for the newspaper? Was it something somebody recommended that you might look at and do? As it fit your skills? I'm just curious. You took that step to start writing, and then you're picked up through this magazine, and it sounds like this article, and writing these articles provides a pretty important cross-cultural connection.
Good question, Jason. That is an interesting segue or connection, the connection to a newspaper, English language newspaper. I sent one of them to the Boston Globe, and they said, we are flooded with articles and op-eds for our newspaper, and obviously they said, try somewhere else. So what did I do? I sent it to the Daily Star in Bangladesh, which I read online, but I said, well, let me give it a shot. And I did. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, they accepted the first story. And then I sent them another one, nonfiction, about a social issue, about what the wage earners in the USA from Bangladesh, how do they send money to the family back home? And that also they found interesting. So I took little steps and eventually started writing more frequently. So for me, I think I was a few years ago, before that, writing and saving them and sharing it with my wife and family, but eventually took that important step, which is to publish. And now I send 99% of my work to others, to publishers, newspapers, magazines, and sometimes online social media for publications. I want to share with others.
Right. And so tell me more about the things that you're sharing. Maybe give us a bit of a chronology, I suppose, with some of your books. Okay? Why don't we discuss the books?
Right. So my earliest book is this one. It is an economics book, and partly based on my dissertation. So I took that manuscript, edited it, and sent it out here, and got published. But that was 25 years ago, and there was a big gap since then. After that, when I started...
So that's perhaps a bit more of an academic
That's an
book?
academic book. Yes, yes. Right. When I was teaching at Stonehill College, I recommended or made that a reading for my students, but it didn't sell too well.
Right.
And after that, I compiled my short stories.
Yeah.
And these have been published in newspapers or in other media.
So that one's called Nightfall?
Nightfall, right. Collection of short stories.
Stories of love, hope, and pain, or hope, love, and pain. Is that right?
That's right.
All right.
Many of my stories have a theme of romance. I'm a big fan of romance. As you can see, my first memoir, The Magic of Love.
Yes.
And there's a lot of stories about my romantic journey, how I fell in love, how I got married, and things of that nature. So this is a memoir, all based on my own experience.
With love.
Yes. And they are similar. So there's a mix. This one is a collection of economic essays, very short essays. These were all published in newspapers or other media.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and I'm
trying to wrap my brain around the fact that you showed me an economic book here, and then memoirs and sort of such a right brain, heartfelt story, and as well as these academic books. It's a very unique balance there. I see with your writing. Do you is that something you reflect on at all?
I do. As I said, I did not start out writing fiction. I never took a class in creative writing. So I thought I was handicapped. It was only when the literary editor said, hey, we don't get short stories, too many short stories. Do you want to give it a shot? And one thing led to the other. My skills basically are in writing nonfiction on social, political, economic issues. And I focus in three areas. One is environmental policy. Mm-hmm. The other is international trade. And the third is development or economic development problems of poor countries. So I write for the readers who are living in Bangladesh and want to know why unemployment is so high, or why we are still suffering from poverty. What do you do? So I see myself as a conduit for information here to the readers there. Like I am engaged in technology transfer, as they call it. And I try not to get too distracted from a core set of issues. For example, I will never write anything about the U.S. foreign policy or the domestic turmoil or domestic issues where the Republicans and Democrats fighting over the border wall. I try to stay away from those because...
So if you're talking about some of these more fundamental economic and development issues for your audience in Bangladesh, but the information is coming from your experience in the United States, what's the process of translation like? Taking ideas and data from one culture and trying to share it and make it accessible to another.
That's very, very interesting because that's what I try to do, exactly what you said. Taking what I learned here in this environment where there's very little economic struggle day to day in my life and translate what I learned so the people over there who are struggling can make any sense out of it. For example, I'll give you an example. I just wrote this piece on lessons from recent industrial disasters. So as you might recall, there was a mine collapse or a dam collapse in South America. And one of the lessons we learned is that prevention is better than cure. So I took that, and then after I have given details of the accident, I will then say, look, in Bangladesh, if you are setting up industries or mines, here are some lessons to be learned. So that's one simple translation or one way to connect from the Western world, experience of the Western world to what's happening in a developing country. And there are many such issues. For example, how do you improve poverty or how do you alleviate poverty? And one of the things that Western countries have done is that they have social policies and support. So one of the recommendations I would make to Bangladesh is that if you can ever afford it, that is something to consider. A minimum income for everybody, or free health care, or providing housing, education, clean drinking water.
So what's the conversation like? Can folks wrap their heads around these these ideas, because it's in part of a system of governing that creates these safety nets and programs and support for folks? It sounds like some of these fundamental concepts you're bringing, that they're just not, that's not part of the experience of what life is like in Bangladesh.
Right. Yes and no.
Okay.
One area they are still struggling with is, how do you provide basic health care for everybody? We know in the US and other Western countries, developed countries, that is a basic right, but also a tool to improve the life of the underprivileged.
Yeah.
Now, can you provide that in a developing country? And the answer is, if you can afford it, which is not an easy matter. The governments cannot always provide free clinic, but that remains a goal. Where and when they can do it, they allocate money for that.
Okay.
So that's something they have on the horizon. Environment, on the other hand, is an issue that they can relate to right away. Not the same environment problems, they have different problems. For example, they are struggling with climate change and the effects of climate change, because these are low-lying countries and excessive heat, rising water level, or deforestation will affect them. Right. So they can connect right away. So there is, in this day and age, a very effective communication or way to transfer knowledge from one area to the other, but they have to customize it. And one of the things I do and other people like me do is to make that transition easier.
Yeah.
That's what my role, I feel, one of the roles I play as somebody who's sitting in the USA and writing for a newspaper in Bangladesh to readers who are in Bangladesh through the print media, but also around the globe. So this is the direct effect of globalization and, you might say, technology revolution.
Right. Well, I started to pick up on a bit of a parallel where, on the one hand, you're talking about these issues, and you want to translate and communicate those to an audience. And what we're talking about with this program, the Writing in the Digital Age, on March 12th at the Queesit House, is you want to take all these tools and you want to translate it to an audience of writers. So I sort of see that as part of something that might be deeper to what makes you tick. You know,
right. It's a virtuous cycle.
Mm-hmm.
I learn.
Yeah.
I show others how to write or use the tools I use, and share it with the audience that could be in India, in Nepal, in Australia, or anywhere in the globe. And then they, in turn, join in. For example, one British newspaper recently published a story about low wages in Bangladesh. You pay only a fraction of the wages for a Bangladeshi worker. So this came out in Britain. And then another scholar in Canada picked it up and he said, yes, that's true. So why don't you pay more for your garments? Another British lord, member of the British House of Lords, said, well, as 35 pence is a lot of money in Bangladesh, so don't discount that. And it went on and on like that. So the debate now is global through media and because of communications.
Right. So are you working on any books currently? Maybe a better way to say this is, so where is your writing at right now? Where is that?
I write every day. Jason, I have...
Glad I asked.
I enjoy writing and do it as a hobby now. So I write every day. I publish every week.
Okay.
I have a column, regular column. It's called An Open Dialogue. I hope my readers will look for it. If they Google An Open Dialogue and use my last name, it will come up. An Open Dialogue, where every week, regularly, I have been publishing a column on social issues. The last one was on mining disaster. The new one is going to be, next week is going to be on poverty level. So that's one motivation for me to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
My 2 new books, my readers will be happy to note, are coming out. They are ready. They were sent to the publishers. I'm waiting for them to send me the final draft.
Yeah.
So it's going to come out. So by that time, hopefully, when I am here next time I speak with you, Jason, I'll have 8 books under my name.
Great. That would be terrific. But even having the 6 in the past 10 years is really demonstrates a level of commitment to writing. Do you have any advice that you would give to a young writer?
Thanks for asking that question. Yes. Again, these I say in my own humble way. First of all, you have to enjoy writing and make a commitment to writing. Because writing, whether you do it for yourself, for a special friend, or for an audience, requires that you give it the time. We're not born a writer. I was not writing for many years. I was just writing emails. But what that helped me to do is to improve my grammar. So if you plan to write, you have to pay attention to that. But also the important thing is read. I cannot say enough about reading good books. And if you enjoy reading books, the writers who have won the Nobel Prize, Ernest Hemingway, John Steinbeck, or Han Pamuk, or other Nobelists, they give you the inspiration, the style. And finally, in this day and age, you can also just write something and check online if the way you write, the metaphors, the style is prevalent, or is it something that others are communicating in the same way. So writing is an art, but also something that you practice. So for young writers, yes, practice, practice, and practice.
Right. Do the digital tools, does the internet networks, has it had any sort of fundamental change in what writing is?
Yes, in a few ways. First of all, it's easy to find an audience. For me, the biggest challenge was 10 years ago that I didn't know how to share with others. Now I can. If I put it on Facebook, I will get immediate feedback. And that's invaluable. If you can find one other person who's willing to read. So if you live in Boston, Easton, and you have a friend or a pen pal in Alaska,
yeah,
and they're willing to read, that's invaluable. Secondly, I have found personally that the ability to check on the style, the flow, and whether particularly I'm cheating. Because I might write something and say, hey, this sounds like somebody plagiarism. For example, when I wrote the title of this book, The Magic of Love, I wanted to make sure there were no other books of that same title.
Right.
And I found that's true. Because if I write Magic of Love and don't acknowledge that I have taken it from someone who wrote before me, that would not be good. And definitely you can quote extensively from other people as long as you are willing to attribute that.
Right.
That I took this from this and that.
All right. So it sounds to me like there's a certain part of accelerates some of the process, the feedback loops, and you can also, I guess it sounds like certain processes accelerate through the technology.
Technology helps immensely. It has helped me immensely, I would say, because I couldn't imagine finding a newspaper without the intermediation of technology.
Right.
Email. Because I saw that newspaper and I knew they had a print version as well as digital version, so I wrote to them. Originally, I was just thinking, hey, I'm going to just write for the Boston Globe, New York Times. But it's very difficult to get your foot in the door with those newspapers.
Sure.
So the digital age came to me as a boon. Plus also, if I needed to check on a source, verify facts, which is very important, facts checking, because I write nonfiction. So if I say, hey, in 1929, the first human being landed on the moon, and I have no way of checking that,
Yeah.
people are going to laugh at me. So facts checking is so easy and so helpful these days. And of course, the digital database, because and there are tons of them. For example, if you need to check, oh, is this article published in such and such date? There are some free database available, but there are some that you can access through a live university and you can check. So digital age has been not only good for commerce,
Yeah.
but for the media, but also for writers, for little writers like me, who 10 years ago, before Facebook, had not written much for an audience, but now I can write and send it out,
Yeah.
and somebody will read.
Well, could you tell me a little bit more about the publishing process?
Good question. Yes. I decided that I was going to write for others. And as I kept on writing, some of my friends said, well, where can I find all your work? And I could point them to the links. Some of the sources I wrote, some of the media I wrote for were archiving online. Eventually, I started looking for a publisher, and I saw one online. And these people, you basically self-publish. You can do it in many different ways. What I do is I send it overseas, a digital or PDF version, and then when it's ready, they let me know. I have to give them a small amount fee, but it's not exorbitant.
Okay.
And then I publish what you might call general publicity for my books through online resources, and also take it to various gatherings and sell them. For example, if you come to my talk next month, I will have copies, and I will also sign them. But the important thing is to find a publisher, and you can decide what works best for you. Because if you can't find Random House or Macmillan to publish your book,
which I imagine must be extremely difficult.
Very difficult. And if even self-publication, cost of has come down significantly. And now I have hard copies, I have soft paperbacks, but the overall cost for me is not very high.
Yeah. Okay. So I did want to ask a question about the flow of culture. It's with your work at the Daily Star, it's a lot of information about the United States and world issues with our systems, with complex systems are presented to the audience in Bangladesh. But I think, I don't want to say I speak for a lot of Americans, but certainly myself, I don't know very much about Bangladesh. And so with the opportunity to with you here, maybe you could share with me, I don't know, a little bit about the country, some things I might not know. Would you be willing to share any?
Sure,
anything
absolutely.
like that?
So Bangladesh, as you know, is a South Asian country. It's bordered on three sides by India and the other one side by Myanmar, which is known as Burma. The country is going through a transformation from agriculture-based economy to now a modern economy, like India, like other South Asian countries. They have the same problems that many other countries do, which is to accelerate economic growth, eradicate poverty, and also to improve the per capita income of people. So now poverty level is going down, and we are still working hard on that. The government is working hard, and the international donors and internet banks are helping them. What is it like to be there? In summer, it's very warm. There's a lot of rain, and their culture and their lifestyle is very different. They don't automatically expect, or they don't get all the modern comforts that we are used to here.
Yeah.
One of the issues that I struggle with every time I go there is traffic jam.
Okay.
In a big city.
What do you mean?
Well, the city capital of Dhaka has 20 million people. You can imagine. Wow. New York has 7 or 8 million, as Dhaka has. So if it means that the roads are totally packed, there's a traffic jam. If you decide to go from one place, whether you're driving a car, whether you're riding a rickshaw, or you're walking, bus, or taking a bus. So that's one thing I struggle with. The other thing is that electricity. You can get electricity in the city, but if you go to the rural areas, not all of them have electricity. So
what about water?
Water is an issue. I wrote recently a piece on water. There's too much water sometimes, flooding. But drinking water, clean drinking water is an issue.
Yeah.
So you're better off boiling the water. That is, you don't want to drink water from the tap. You get used to it. People who live there, and sometimes they drink water from the streams or rivers, and that sometimes causes problems.
Okay.
But it's getting better. It is so it's like a curve. It's sloping upward, and mercifully, it's not dipped. In other words, it's not ebb and flow. It's some of the indicators, as we call them, are pointing upward. Some others, they are ups and downs, foreign exchange, for example. But it's, by and large, it's doing very well now and improving every day. The government is committed to a policy called Sustainable Development Goals, which it partnered with the United Nations, and 17 goals, including elimination of poverty by 2030, jobs, equal right for women, and many others. So the SDG is a very big acronym there, Sustainable Development Goals, and everybody's working towards it.
Well, it's very informative for me to hear that sort of story about that part of the world. I do want to bring it back to the presentation that you're having at the Ames Free Library on March 12th. That's at 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. over at the Queesit House, and it's called Writing in the Digital Age. Before we close out, is there anything else you'd like to discuss about this workshop? Let people know, our viewers here in Easton or elsewhere.
Sure. Please join me and the great people over at Ames Free Library who are facilitating this. I will share with you my experience as a writer, bring my books, and give you a few tips on writing, on the tools, and how I managed to navigate this process. Please do come. If you have anything you want to share with me, I'd be happy to look at it. But most importantly, I can tell you, if you are still testing the water, how to take the first step.
Okay. Well, Abdul Shibley, it has been really great having you in the studio today. And I also want to encourage people to check out your workshop. I do think that you have a very unique voice, and I think it sounds like it will be a very interesting program.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you very much for your kind words and for inviting me to this conversation with you, and for putting in a good word about the seminar, workshop, whichever you call it.
Well, the pleasure's been mine, so thanks again.